He invited his ex-wife to the party to humiliate her. But when she walked in radiant, everyone was speechless. The grand ballroom of the Whitmore estate in Chicago glimmered under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, their light scattering like captured stars across the polished oak floors. The scent of fresh lilies, laced with the crisp tang of champagne, filled the air, while a string quartet's delicate notes wove through the hum of conversation, wrapping the guests in an aura of elegance. It was a night of triumph, a celebration of another milestone for Whitmore Enterprises, the company Daniel Whitmore had built into a powerhouse with his unrelenting drive and magnetic charm. Tables draped in ivory silk held centerpieces of rare peonies, and waiters in crisp black uniforms glided through the crowd, balancing silver trays adorned with miniature culinary masterpieces. The evening radiated wealth, but beneath the polished surface, a subtle tension simmered, a quiet promise of something yet to unfold amid the practiced laughter. At the heart of this lavish scene, Daniel moved with the ease of a man born to lead. His tailored charcoal suit hugged his frame, and his sharp blue eyes gleamed with a mix of pride and cunning as he greeted investors, local dignitaries, and socialites vying for his attention. He raised a crystal flute, his smile carrying a hint of secrets unspoken, but his thoughts were elsewhere. While the guests chatted about mergers and markets, Daniel's mind lingered on Ryan, his childhood friend, and the carefully orchestrated plan he'd set in motion. Ryan leaned against a marble pillar, his face half lit by the warm glow reflecting off the floor. He cradled a tumbler of bourbon, the amber liquid swirling as his fingers tapped the glass. Tall, with dark hair swept back and a neatly trimmed goatee, he still carried the charisma that had turned heads in their youth. But there was a hardness to him now, a tightness in his jaw, a coolness in his gaze that hadn't been there before. Beside him, Lauren, his girlfriend, shimmered in a sapphire gown that clung to her like a second skin. Her laughter rang out, bright and sharp, as she shared a story with a cluster of guests. The sound was like clinking glass, but it carried an edge, as if she demanded every eye in the room. "Got the guest list finalized, Daniel?" Ryan asked, his voice low, almost lost in the buzz of the crowd. He didn't look at his friend, his eyes fixed on the bourbon, as if it held answers he couldn't find elsewhere. Daniel stepped closer, his smile steady, but with a playful glint. He rested a hand on Ryan's shoulder, a gesture that seemed casual but pulsed with the weight of their long friendship, and a hidden challenge. "Almost. But there's one name missing, my friend. An important one." He paused, savoring the moment, before dropping the name. "Isabel. Before we continue, would you please leave a like and subscribe to the channel? Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now let's continue." The word landed like a stone, shattering the quiet between them. Ryan's head snapped up, his brows knitting, his jaw tightening. The name dragged up memories he'd buried deep. The cramped apartment they'd shared, the smell of morning coffee, the fights that started small and grew into storms, leaving only slammed doors and broken vows. Isabel, his ex-wife, was a chapter he'd tried to erase like a faded photograph he hoped time would blur. But tonight, Daniel had brought her back with a single word. "Isabel?" Ryan's voice was rougher than he meant, and he cleared his throat, trying to mask it. "Why the hell would you invite her? That's done, Daniel. Over." Daniel tilted his head, his smile turning cryptic, as if he saw something Ryan couldn't. He swirled the wine in his glass, the deep red catching the light before he spoke. "Over? Maybe. But I always liked her, you know. Isabel's got something unique, a strength you never really appreciated. Besides, this is a night to celebrate. Why not include everyone who's part of our story?" Ryan snorted, the sound muffled by the party's hum. He took a long sip of bourbon, the burn in his throat not enough to quell the irritation rising in his chest. The last time he'd seen Isabel was nearly 2 years ago at the final divorce signing. She'd worn faded jeans, a plain grey sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes, once so bright, seemed dim, as if life had drained the spark from them. He remembered feeling a twinge of pity, mixed with a selfish relief. He'd moved on, as Lauren liked to say. He'd traded the tiny apartment for a penthouse, the faded ex-wife for a girlfriend who shone like a diamond in any room. Inviting Isabel now felt like a cruel joke, a way to rub his success in her face while she stayed stuck in the past. "She won't show," Ryan said, his voice thick with disdain. "Isabel's not the type for places like this anymore. Probably busy changing diapers or scrubbing floors. This isn't her scene." Lauren, who'd been half listening with a smirk, sidled closer, her heels clicking on the marble. She looped her arm through Ryan's, her floral perfume staking a claim on the space. Her green eyes sparkled with mischief and amusement as she leaned in, her voice sweet but sharp as a blade. "You know what? I think you should invite her. It'll be fun." She stretched the word, letting it linger like honey. "Everyone will see how far you've come, babe, and she'll see what she lost." Ryan glanced at Lauren, a knot twisting in his chest. It wasn't guilt exactly, but an unease he couldn't name. Humiliating Isabel, parading her as a relic of his past, was tempting but risky. He knew her, or thought he did. Even at their lowest, she had a quiet stubbornness, a strength he'd never fully understood. But now? Now she was just a ghost of who she'd been, right? A single mum scraping by, far from the glamour he and Lauren lived in. His wounded pride spoke louder. "Fine," he said at last, his tone aiming for indifference but laced with venom. "Send the invite. Don't expect her to show, and if she does—" He shrugged, a crooked smile forming. "Like Lauren said, it'll be a reminder of who won." Daniel raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He nodded as if sealing a deal and slipped back into the crowd, leaving Ryan and Lauren with their thoughts. The quartet shifted to a slower, almost mournful tune, and the ballroom seemed to pulse with a new energy, as if it sensed a change coming. Across town, in a Chicago neighborhood where streetlights flickered and the scent of fresh bagels drifted from a corner bakery, Isabel sat at her kitchen table, the only spot in her small apartment where silence reigned. The dim glow of a pendant lamp cast soft shadows across her face, highlighting the tired lines around her eyes. She held the invitation, its thick paper embossed with the Whitmore family crest, looking out of place among chipped plates and a stack of unpaid bills. Her daughter Lily slept in the next room, her gentle breathing a quiet anchor for Isabel's racing thoughts. The invitation wasn't just paper, it was a gauntlet, a taunt dressed as courtesy. She knew Ryan too well to believe it came from kindness or nostalgia. Their divorce had cut deep, not just through her heart, but her soul. He'd left her with nothing but a toddler and a void that felt impossible to fill. Yet Isabel wasn't one to break. Not then, not now. She opened the envelope carefully as if it might bite. Daniel's elegant handwriting stared back, but the words carried a hidden intent, a night to celebrate the future with a nod to the past. Isabel closed her eyes, the weight of buried memories flooding back. Late nights waiting for Ryan, the silence that choked their home, the promises he made and never kept. Then, the image of him with Lauren, the woman who seemed everything Isabel wasn't, or everything Ryan wanted her not to be. But there was something else in the invitation, something she couldn't ignore. Daniel. He'd always been kind, even when Ryan wasn't. During their marriage, Daniel showed up with a warm smile and a friendly word, as if trying to make up for his friend's failures. He saw something in Isabel she'd forgotten, a resilience, a spark, a refusal to crumble. Now, with this invitation, he seemed to say, "You're more than they think." Isabel stood, still clutching the invitation, and walked to the small mirror on the peeling living room wall. She looked at herself, really looked, for the first time in months. Her dark hair, tied in a loose ponytail, lacked luster. Her skin, once radiant, bore the marks of sleepless nights. But her eyes, they still held something. A flicker, faint but alive. She thought of Lily, the daughter who deserved a mother who didn't bend, who didn't hide. Then she thought of the crimson dress, a gift from her brother Michael before he left. It lay tucked in the back of her closet, untouched, a secret she hadn't dared reveal. She returned to the table, the invitation now feeling less like a taunt and more like a call, not to prove something to Ryan or Lauren or even Daniel, but to herself, to the woman she'd been and could still be. With a breath, she grabbed her phone and dialed Mrs. Rosa, the neighborhood seamstress, a woman with deft hands and a heart full of stories, who always said, "A good dress can rewrite your story." The decision was made. She'd go to the party, not for revenge, not for pride, but because for the first time in years, she felt she belonged there. Back at the estate, Ryan drained his bourbon, the ice melting into a puddle. Lauren laughed beside him, plotting how she'd turn Isabel's arrival into a spectacle of humiliation. Daniel, a few feet away, watched them with a gaze that mixed pity and anticipation. He knew something Ryan didn't, something even Isabel hadn't fully grasped. This night wasn't just a party. It was the start of a reckoning, a moment when past and future would collide, leaving no one untouched. And when the estate's doors opened for Isabel, the worlds of Ryan, Lauren, and even Daniel would never be the same. But what would Isabel do when she stepped through those doors? And what would Ryan feel, seeing not the woman he left behind, but someone he'd never truly known? The night was just beginning, and the invitation, so simple on its surface, held the key to a secret yet to be unveiled. Night settled heavily over Isabel's Chicago neighborhood, the sky a deep indigo streaked with hurried clouds. The distant hum of a TV next door mingled with the buzz of a flickering street lamp, casting unsteady shadows on cracked sidewalks. Inside her modest apartment, the silence was warm, like a quiet embrace. Isabel sat at the kitchen table, the Whitmore Crest invitation crumpled at the edges from her restless fingers. Its thick paper and faint ink scent felt foreign amid the lingering aroma of homemade bread and the lavender soap Lily used before bed. Isabel let the invitation slip to the table as if releasing it could ease its weight. She knew Ancha this paper meant. Not kindness, not a bridge to the past, but a challenge, a barb wrapped in politeness, with Ryan's intent woven into every line, despite Daniel's handwriting. She knew him too well to believe in sentiment. During their marriage, he'd wielded silence like a weapon, turning kind words into blades that cut invisibly. This invitation was another such blade, aimed with precision to wound. Yet something else stirred, undeniable. Opening the envelope had cracked open a door within her, letting out a whisper of who she'd once been. Before Ryan, before the divorce, before she was just Lily's mum, Isabel had been a woman who laughed freely, danced barefoot to old records, dreamed of a world bigger than her reality. That woman still lingered, buried under exhaustion and disappointment, and the invitation, cruel as it was, seemed to beckon her back. She rose, her bare feet cool against the ceramic floor, and padded to Lily's room. The door creaked softly, and the hallway's dim light framed her daughter in a gentle glow. Lily, 5 years old, slept curled up, her dark hair fanned across the pillow like a fallen crown. Her lips parted in soft breaths, her tiny hand clutching a worn teddy bear from Michael. Isabel knelt beside the bed, her heart tight with love and guilt. Lily was her anchor, her reason to keep going, but also a reminder of all she'd sacrificed. Yet those sleeping eyes seemed to whisper, "You're enough, Mommy." Isabel brushed Lily's cheek, the warmth of her skin easing the night's chill. In that moment, her resolve hardened. She'd go to the party, not for Ryan, Lauren, or Daniel, for Lily, for Michael, for herself. It wasn't revenge driving her, but a primal need to reclaim who she was, to prove, if only to herself, that life hadn't erased her. Back in the living room, she opened the creaky closet, its wooden doors guarding secrets. Buried under a white cloth was the crimson dress. She lifted it carefully, like handling a relic. The satin shimmered in the faint light, and a lump rose in her throat. Michael had given her this dress for her last birthday together, before the accident took him. "Red's your color, Izzy," he'd said, his grin lighting up the room. "It's for people who aren't afraid to be seen." She'd never worn it. There'd been no occasion, no courage. But now, holding it close, she felt Michael's presence, as if he whispered, "It's time." The next morning, sunlight filtered through thin curtains, and Isabel was up, fueled by a spark she hadn't felt in months. She tucked the dress into a fabric bag and walked through her neighborhood, where coffee's aroma mixed with kids' laughter and a distant dog's bark. Mrs. Rosa's house, a small bungalow with a porch bursting with ferns, was a short walk away. Mrs. Rosa was a local legend, her grey hair and piercing eyes hinting at wisdom beyond her years. They said her hands didn't just sew clothes, they stitched stories, breathing new life into those who wore them. "Morning, Isabel," Mrs. Rosa greeted, opening the door with a smile that smelled of peppermint tea. "What brings you here so early?" Isabel hesitated, the dress's weight heavier than it should have been. She hadn't told anyone about the invitation or her decision, but in Mrs. Rosa's warm gaze, words spilled out. "I need an alteration. It's a special dress for a party." She paused, biting her lip. "I think it needs your touch to be perfect." Mrs. Rosa raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. She beckoned Isabel inside, and soon the crimson dress lay across her work table, its satin glowing like it had a pulse. The seamstress ran her fingers over the fabric, murmuring about its quality, but her eyes studied Isabel, as if reading an unwritten story. "This dress has a tail, doesn't it?" she asked, measuring the satin. "And so do you. What's your plan, sweetheart?" Isabel smiled, small but real. She wasn't ready to share everything. But Mrs. Rosa's raspy voice and the scent of thread and fabric made her feel safe. "I just want to feel like me again," she said softly, but with conviction. "That's all." Mrs. Rosa nodded, as if she understood more than the words. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who knew every secret of needle and thread. As pins shaped the dress, Isabel felt herself being reshaped too. Each stitch seemed to pull back a memory, a strength, a version of her she'd nearly forgotten. The days that followed were a quiet whirlwind of preparation. Isabel kept the party secret, even from her mother, who lived nearby and always asked why she seemed so distant. Lily, with her child's intuition, noticed her mother's lighter mood, humming while cooking or smiling for no reason. "You happy, Mummy?" she asked one afternoon, scribbling with crayons. Isabel kissed her forehead. Her heart warmed. "I'm trying, sweetheart," she said, the words truer than anything she'd said in months. Between visits to Mrs. Rosa, Isabel began reclaiming herself in small ways. She trimmed her hair just enough to revive its shine. She bought a red lipstick, something she'd never worn but felt right with the dress and the woman she wanted to be. Each act was like kindling a flame, small but stubborn. She wasn't transforming for Ryan or Lauren. She was doing it for herself, for Lily, for Michael, for the life still ahead. The night before the party, the dress was ready. Mrs. Rosa handed it over with a gleam in her eyes, as if she knew it was more than fabric. "You'll shine, Isabel," she said, squeezing her hand. "Not because the dress is pretty, but because you are." Isabel's eyes stung, but she smiled, promising to return with the night story. She went home, the dress wrapped carefully, her heart pounding. Alone in her bedroom, she tried it on. The chipped dresser mirror reflected a stranger. The crimson satin hugged her curves with a gentleness that defied time and weariness. The soft neckline framed her collarbone, the fabric flowing like a waterfall, lending her an elegance she didn't know she still had. She turned slowly, the satin brushing her skin, and for a moment saw Michael in the reflection, grinning as he had that night. "It's for people who aren't afraid to be seen," his voice echoed. But the change wasn't just outward. Every choice, accepting the invitation, visiting Mrs. Rosa, choosing the lipstick, facing the mirror, was a step away from the woman who'd let herself fade. She didn't want to prove anything to Ryan, but the thought of facing him, of meeting his eyes, sent a shiver through her. Not fear, but anticipation. What would he say? What would Lauren do? And Daniel, with his enigmatic smile, what did he expect from this night? Isabel hung the dress carefully, a promise in satin. She lay beside Lily, who slept with the peace of a child who believed in happy endings. Stroking her daughter's hair, Isabel felt a resolve she hadn't known in years. She'd go to the party, not as Ryan's ex-wife, not as a weary mother, not as a shadow of her past. She'd go as Isabel, just Isabel, and that was the greatest rebellion she could imagine. What would happen when she crossed the estate's threshold? Who would she meet beyond the ghosts of her past? And what did fate hold for a woman who'd chosen, against all odds, to reignite her own light? The night of the party loomed, promising a revelation that could change everything. The oak doors of the Whitmore estate opened with a soft creak, as if whispering a secret the world wasn't ready to hear. The night air, laced with the scent of lilies from the gardens, swept into the ballroom, mingling with the warm glow of chandeliers and the clink of crystal flutes. The quartet's music floated, a refined murmur enveloping the guests, who were lost in their polished conversations, their smiles as calculated as their outfits. Designer gowns rustled against the oak floor, and jewels caught the light, casting tiny rainbows on the walls. It was a night of display, where every gesture was deliberate, every word weighed for alliances or egos. At the center, Lauren glided like a self-crowned queen, her sapphire gown shimmering with every step, as if it drank in the light and gave it back twofold. Her blonde hair, swept into an elegant updo, gleamed under the chandeliers, and her green eyes scanned the room with the confidence of someone who knew all eyes were hers. Beside her, Ryan stood firm, his navy suit tailored to perfection, but a tension in his shoulders betrayed the unease he hid. He held a champagne flute, barely sipping, his fingers drumming the glass as his eyes darted across the room, searching or avoiding. Lauren, oblivious to his restlessness, leaned in, her breath warm with floral perfume. "Look at this, babe," she purred, her voice dripping with triumph. "This is our world now, and no one can say otherwise." She raised her flute, toasting a group of investors who chuckled at some quip, and Ryan forced a smile, his jaw tight. She was right, but the thought of Isabel, the slim chance she'd actually come, lingered like a shadow he couldn't shake. Across the ballroom, Daniel watched it all with the calm of a conductor before the overture. Leaning against a pillar, he swirled a glass of red wine, its ruby hue catching golden flecks. His blue eyes roamed the crowd, but a quiet anticipation flickered in them, unnoticed by most. He chatted with a pair of shareholders, his words automatic, his mind elsewhere. Daniel knew the night was about to shift, and the invitation he'd pushed Ryan to send was the spark. Then it happened. The ballroom's hum faltered, as if the air itself held its breath. The oak doors parted again, flanked by two pristine doormen, and Isabel stepped through. The crimson dress hugged her with an elegance that seemed to defy time, its satin catching the chandelier light in warm waves that made the room feel alive. Her dark hair fell in soft waves, framing her face, and her red lipstick accented her lips, lending a presence both gentle and commanding. But it wasn't the dress, the hair, or the makeup that drew every eye. It was something deeper, a quiet strength radiating from her every step, like a secret the world wasn't worthy of yet. The ballroom hushed, not completely but a collective pause, where laughter softened to whispers, flutes froze mid-sip, and eyes locked on the figure no one expected. Lauren, mid-sentence, faltered, her flute tilting, a tremor in her hand. Her confident smile cracked just for a second, like a mask slipping. Instinctively, she grabbed her phone, fingers moving as she recorded Isabel's entrance, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "This'll be good," she muttered, already crafting a mocking caption for social media. She posted without a second thought, certain she'd captured a moment of humiliation, a trophy for her vanity. Ryan beside her froze, his flute slipped, champagne nearly spilling as he stared. Isabel wasn't the woman he remembered, the faded figure in worn jeans and tired eyes. This Isabel was a stranger, one he didn't recognize, yet she made him feel small. Her eyes, now alight with a resolve he'd never noticed, scanned the room with calm assurance as if she belonged. His heart raced, a mix of shock, discomfort, and something he couldn't name. The floor seemed to tilt beneath him, and he didn't know how to stand steady. Daniel, meanwhile, smiled, a subtle, almost invisible curve of his lips, but brimming with satisfaction. He set his wineglass on a table and approached Isabel, his steps steady but unhurried, savoring the moment. "Isabel," he said, his voice warm and genuine, extending his hands. "You look radiant." He tilted his head, his eyes meeting hers with a respect that spoke louder than words. Isabel returned the smile, small but grateful. "Thank you, Daniel," she said, her voice soft yet steady like a violin string perfectly tuned. Their exchange broke the spell over the ballroom. Whispers resumed, now charged with curiosity and speculation. Who was this woman? Why did she seem so at ease in a world that wasn't hers? And why did Ryan, the man who ruled this domain, look so shaken? Lauren, still clutching her phone, realized her mistake too late. The video she'd posted, meant to mock, now showcased a stunning woman who owned the room effortlessly. She swallowed hard, the bitter taste of her own arrogance rising. "How did she—" she started, but the words died as she glanced at Ryan, waiting for a reaction he couldn't muster. Isabel, unaware of the storm her arrival had sparked, moved through the ballroom with a grace that belied the tension around her. She didn't need to speak or explain. Her presence was enough, a silent declaration that she was no longer the woman anyone, not even herself, had underestimated. She accepted a champagne flute from a waiter, the cool glass grounding her, and let her eyes sweep the room. Curiosity, envy, admiration. She felt the weight of their gazes, but remained unshaken. She was here for herself, and that was all that mattered. Lauren, scrambling to regain control, tried to rally. She approached a group of friends, her smile bright but brittle, like a bulb about to burn out. "Did you see who showed up?" she said, loud enough to carry. "Ryan's ex. Can you believe she had the nerve?" Her friends laughed, but the sound was uncertain, as if they weren't sure whether to follow her scorn or acknowledge Isabel's strength. Lauren looked to Ryan for support, but he stayed silent, his eyes still on Isabel, as if grappling with a puzzle he'd never seen before. Daniel, guiding Isabel through the crowd, introduced her to guests with the ease of someone who saw her as an equal. "Isabel's an old friend," he said, his voice warm with pride, "and one of the most remarkable people I know." She smiled, answering questions with a calm that disarmed even the skeptics. But her eyes caught everything. Lauren's burning stare, a mix of jealousy and insecurity, Ryan's rigid stance wrestling with something he wouldn't admit, and the guests' whispers rippling like waves. She felt their scrutiny, but also the strength that had brought her here, a strength deeper than any dress. Ryan, still by the pillar, felt the air grow heavy. He tried to focus on Lauren, the party, anything but Isabel, but it was futile. Her every move, her smile to Daniel, her words to the guests, was a knife twisting in a wound he didn't know he had. He remembered her as the woman he'd left behind, the tired mother, the wife who couldn't keep up. Now, he saw he'd never truly known her, and that realization terrified him. Lauren's planned mockery, her vision of humiliating Isabel, crumbled against reality. Isabel wasn't a victim, not a ghost of the past. She was a force, reshaping the room without trying. And as her video spread online, drawing comments she hadn't anticipated, "Who is this woman? Such elegance. She stole the night." The game she thought she controlled slipped away. Isabel, without a word, commanded the space, and no one, not even she, knew how far this night would take her. What would Ryan do, facing a woman he'd never truly seen? How would Lauren, her confidence cracking, react to this shift? And Daniel, with his knowing smile, what was he still hiding? The night was young, and the ballroom, alive with new energy, held secrets ready to unravel. The Whitmore estate thrummed with a fresh pulse, as if the air itself had shifted to match Isabel's presence. The quartet's melody softened, echoing the restless hearts in the room, while the chandelier's glow danced in the crystal flutes, whispering secrets. The scent of lilies blended with the morning roses on the tables, creating a warmth laced with tension. Guests in silk gowns and tailored suits moved in small clusters, their eyes split between their talks, and the crimson figure gliding through the ballroom with a grace that seemed to defy gravity. Isabel moved with effortless poise, her dress rippling softly, as if it echoed her spirit. She didn't seek attention, but it found her, gazes trailing her like moths to a flame. Some hid their curiosity behind polite smiles, others whispered with stifled giggles, but none of it fazed her. She held her champagne flute, the liquid catching the light, and her dark eyes surveyed the room with a calm that was almost unnerving. There was no strain in her posture, no effort to fit into this world of facades. She simply was, and that made her magnetic. Daniel, ever watchful, stayed near, guiding her with the ease of someone who saw her as part of this scene. He introduced her to his family, who welcomed her warmly. Mrs. Eleanor, Daniel's mother with silver hair and kind eyes, clasped Isabel's hand firmly, her smile rich with quiet wisdom. "You're just as Daniel described," she said softly, her words heavy with meaning. "A rare soul." Isabel smiled, a warmth spreading in her chest, and nodded her thanks. The Whitmore family, with their blend of grace and genuineness, made her feel at home, as if this opulent ballroom were an extension of her simple kitchen, where she raised Lily. Across the room, Lauren fought to hold her ground, but her efforts grew strained. She flitted among guests, her smile too bright, her voice too loud as she shared stories no one seemed to hear. "Can you believe she showed up like that?" she said to her friends, gesturing with her wine glass, the liquid nearly spilling. "It's almost sad, right?" But the laughter she expected didn't come. Her friends exchanged hesitant glances, one murmuring, "She seems to be holding her own." Lauren felt the floor slip beneath her heels, her floral perfume now stifling. She checked her phone, where the video of Isabel racked up likes and comments that made her jaw clench. "Stunning," one read. "Who is she?" another asked. Her attempt at mockery had backfired, each notification a reminder of her misstep. Ryan, leaning against the mahogany bar, seemed detached from the chatter. His bourbon glass held only melted ice, the amber liquid long gone, its warmth no match for the chill in his chest. His eyes stayed on Isabel, watching her like a puzzle he couldn't solve. Her every gesture, the tilt of her head as she listened to Mrs. Eleanor, the quiet smile she gave Daniel, the delicate way she held her flute, was a piece that didn't fit the image he'd held. The Isabel he knew, or thought he knew, was faded, worn down by life, someone he'd left without a second glance. Now he saw his mistake. He'd been the one out of step, blind to her strength. The realization made him feel small, the ballroom shrinking around him. Memories surfaced, not sharp but blurred. Isabel's laugh on a Sunday morning, dancing in their tiny kitchen to a crackling radio, the patience in her eyes he'd never valued, the silence that filled their home when fights began, a silence he now saw as her strength, holding together what was left. He'd mistaken it for weakness, but now he knew better. He sipped the last of his bourbon, the burn not enough to dull the ache. He'd lost something he hadn't understood, and it was unraveling him. Meanwhile, Mark, Ryan's right-hand man at the company, watched from a corner. Mark was understated, with wire-rimmed glasses and a quick smile that hid a sharp mind. He'd worked with Ryan for years, but never bought into his ego. Now his eyes followed Isabel with genuine admiration, not for her beauty but for her dignity. He'd known her during the marriage, when she'd dropped by the office with homemade cookies or a kind word. Even then, he'd seen her light, one Ryan ignored. "You were a fool, buddy," he muttered, sipping his cocktail, its citrus tang sharp against the bitterness he felt for his boss. Daniel, sensing Isabel's impact, approached her again, his gaze mixing respect with something deeper, perhaps a shared understanding he didn't fully grasp. "You're doing better than I expected," he said quietly, like sharing a secret. Isabel laughed, a light sound that brightened the space. "I'm not sure I'm doing anything, Daniel, just being me." He tilted his head, his smile widening. "And that's more than enough." He offered his arm and she took it, letting him guide her to a group of investors, where their conversation flowed with an ease that surprised even her. Lauren, watching them, felt a sting of jealousy she couldn't admit. She grabbed Ryan's arm, her grip tighter than needed. "You okay, babe?" she asked, her voice sweet but urgent. Ryan's eyes flicked from Isabel to Lauren, but he didn't answer, just nodded mechanically, his mind elsewhere. Lauren bit her lip, her red lipstick smudging, and tried a new tack. "Want to dance? Show them who runs this place?" She nodded toward the dance floor, where couples swayed to the music. But Ryan shook his head, his bourbon glass still clenched. "Later," he said, his voice rough, barely audible. The rejection, subtle as it was, hit Lauren like a slap. She stepped back, her heels sharp against the oak, and joined another group, laughing too loudly, as if to fill the void growing inside her. But her eyes stayed on Ryan and Isabel, her insecurity showing in small ways. Twisting her pearl necklace, the slight shake in her hand holding the flute, the smile that didn't reach her eyes. Isabel, oblivious to the drama, moved through the ballroom with a lightness that defied the tension. She answered questions with a sincerity that disarmed even the haughtiest guests. A businessman, expecting a mundane story, asked about her life, but her response lingered. "Life taught me it's not where you are, but who you choose to be." He blinked, nodding as if struck by an unexpected truth. Isabel wasn't trying to impress, but she did, her authenticity outshining any jewel in the room. Mark, still watching, approached when Isabel stood alone, gazing at the garden through the glass doors. "Isabel," he said gently, a hint of hesitation in his voice. She turned, her face lighting up with recognition. "Mark." It's been forever." They shared a quick hug, warm with old familiarity. "You're different," he said carefully. "I can't explain it, but it's like you found something that was always there." Isabel laughed, the sound clear and bright. "Maybe I just stopped hiding," she said, her eyes shining with a truth she was still uncovering. Their chat was cut short as Daniel invited Isabel to the terrace to see the city view. She agreed, but not before glancing back at the ballroom, her eyes meeting Ryan's for a fleeting moment. The air crackled with unspoken history, past and present colliding. Ryan felt breathless, his bourbon glass nearly slipping. He wanted to act, to speak, but didn't know how. For the first time, he saw the woman he'd lost, not the wife he'd dismissed, but the woman he'd never valued. As Isabel climbed the terrace stairs, the ballroom buzzed with new tension. Lauren, now alone, stared at her phone, where Isabel's video gained traction, each comment a jab at her pride. Mark, back at his spot, watched Ryan with pity and curiosity, wondering what he'd do as his ego cracked. And Daniel, leading Isabel to the terrace, knew the night was far from over. Something bigger was stirring, something even his sharp mind couldn't fully predict. What would Ryan do with the truth staring him down? And Isabel, feeling the weight of eyes and whispers, would she hold her strength for what lay ahead? The terrace, with its endless view, was the stage for the next act in a story no one could ignore. The terrace of the Whitmore estate opened like a canvas to the night, Chicago's skyline sprawling below, its lights twinkling like fallen stars. A cool breeze carried the scent of lilies from the gardens, tinged with the faint salt of Lake Michigan, and the ballroom's music drifted up, softened by distance. The white stone floor reflected moonlight, and iron lanterns cast dancing shadows. Isabel stood by the balustrade, her crimson dress swaying lightly, her champagne flute warm from being held too long. Her eyes traced the city, but her mind lingered on the ballroom, on the fleeting glance she'd shared with Ryan, the electric charge still humming in her veins. Daniel, beside her, pointed out landmarks, his voice a warm murmur of pride and nostalgia. He was the perfect host, but a subtle caution in his tone hinted he knew the night was veering into uncharted territory. "Ever been somewhere like this, Isabel?" he asked, his blue eyes bright with genuine curiosity. She smiled, a small gesture layered with meaning. "Not quite," she said, her voice soft as the satin against her skin. "But I'm starting to get the hang of it." As they spoke, Ryan appeared at the terrace stairs, his bourbon glass clutching only melted ice. He paused on the last step, his feet heavy as if the ground might give way. Seeing Isabel, her dress glowing in the moonlight, stopped him cold. Time folded in on itself, showing him the woman he'd known years ago, now radiant with a strength he'd never seen. He cleared his throat, the sound rough, and Daniel turned, his smile subtle but knowing. "I'll let you two talk," Daniel said, his tone light but deliberate. He clapped Ryan's shoulder before descending, leaving them alone. The silence was thick, heavy with years of unspoken words. Isabel didn't turn right away, her eyes still on the city, as if seeking answers in its lights. Ryan stepped forward, his shoes echoing on the stone, grasping for words that slipped away. "Isabel," he started, his voice shaky, testing the ground. "I didn't think you'd come." It was a weak line, he knew, but it was all he could manage before the woman who now faced him, her calm gaze stripping him bare. She turned, her dress catching the moonlight in warm hues, her eyes meeting his. There was no anger in them, just a clarity that left him exposed. "I didn't think I would either," she said, her voice steady, free of malice. "But I got the invitation, and I decided I deserved to be here." Her words were simple but sharp, cutting through the air. Ryan swallowed, the bourbon's bitter aftertaste lingering, and tried to explain. "It wasn't my idea, you know. Daniel insisted. I didn't think you'd show." Isabel tilted her head, a subtle move that carried weight. "You didn't think I'd show because you thought I couldn't," she said, not accusingly but as a fact. "You always thought you knew me, Ryan, but you never really looked." Her words rippled like stones in a pond, undeniable. He opened his mouth to argue, to defend himself, but her calm, the way she held her flute with near-sacred poise, stopped him. For the first time he listened, not just to her words, but to what lay beneath. She continued, her voice softer, almost introspective. "Do you know what it's like to wake up every day knowing everything depends on you? Every bill, every tear Lily cries, every piece of her future. It's all on me. I raised our daughter alone, Ryan, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. And every time I fell, every time I thought I couldn't go on, I got up. Not out of anger, not to prove anything to anyone, but for self-respect, because I deserve more than being someone's shadow." The breeze carried the scent of lilies and the faint echo of music, and Ryan felt his defenses crack. He wanted to counter, to say he'd had his own struggles, that life hadn't been easy for him either, but her truth made his words feel hollow. He saw her now, not the wife he'd judged lacking, but the woman who'd carried the world with a strength he'd never had. I didn't know," he mumbled, his voice breaking, his eyes dropping to the empty glass, as if it held answers. Isabel didn't smile, but she held his gaze. "You didn't know because you didn't want to," she said, her voice a whisper but firm as the stone beneath her. "But I'm not here to blame you, Ryan. I'm here because I chose to remember who I am, and that has nothing to do with you." She stepped back, her dress flickering like a flame, and Ryan felt her slipping away again, not to divorce, but to the woman she'd always been, one he'd never valued. From the ballroom, Daniel watched through the glass doors, his wine glass swirling slowly, its ruby hue catching the light. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction and a touch of melancholy. He knew this night was more than a party, more than a corporate milestone. It was a revelation, a moment when masks fell and truth surfaced. He'd seen Isabel's light from the start, one she'd long overlooked, and now, watching her face Ryan with quiet dignity, he knew the invitation had served its purpose. But the night wasn't just about Isabel and Ryan. Lauren, who'd left the terrace earlier, paced the ballroom, her composure fraying. She felt the shift in the room, the gazes no longer admiring but curious, as if everyone sensed a change. Her phone buzzed with notifications, the video of Isabel gaining comments that stung her pride. She tried to brush it off, tossing her blonde hair and laughing too loudly with acquaintances, but the sound rang hollow. Then she saw Ryan on the terrace talking to Isabel, and jealousy flared, sharp and hot. "Ryan!" she called, her voice slicing through the air with a desperation she couldn't hide. She climbed the stairs, her heels striking like hammers, and stopped at the terrace entrance, her sapphire gown catching the moonlight. "Babe, you okay? They're waiting for us downstairs." Her words were sweet, but possessive, impossible to miss. Ryan turned, his face still marked by his talk with Isabel, and for a moment he looked lost, as if he didn't know who owned this moment. Isabel glanced at Lauren, her eyes calm but piercing. There was no challenge in them, just a clarity that made Lauren feel small. "He's fine," Isabel said, her voice soft as a breeze. "We were just talking." She didn't wait for a reply, gliding past Lauren with the same ease she'd carried through the ballroom, descending to the party. That brief encounter left a mark. Lauren felt the ground shake, not from Isabel, but from what she saw in Ryan's eyes, a doubt, a crack she couldn't mend. The ballroom hummed with a new energy, as if everyone felt the shift. Isabel, back among the crowd, was a mirror to many. To those who'd underestimated her, those who admired her, those who saw in her something they'd lost. She spoke with Mrs. Eleanor again, laughed with Mark, accepted a stranger's compliment with grace. But her mind drifted to the terrace, to the moment she'd felt Ryan truly hear her. It wasn't a victory, not a trophy. It was truth, raw and real, and that was enough. Daniel, watching from afar, raised his glass in a silent toast, as if saluting the woman who'd become the night's heart. He knew the game had changed, the pieces moving in ways no one could predict. And as Ryan lingered on the terrace, his empty glass abandoned, and Lauren fought to hold her place beside him, the night whispered a promise. Nothing would be the same. But what would Ryan do with the truth he now carried? And Isabel, with her newfound strength, what would she find in the night's next chapter? The garden with its secrets held answers yet to come. The Whitmore estate glowed softly as dawn hinted on the horizon. The chandelier's light faded, outshone by the pale glow seeping through the windows, and the quartet played its final notes, a gentle farewell to the guests. The scent of lilies mingled with the morning's freshness, and empty crystal flutes caught the first rays of sun like prisms, Isabel, back in the ballroom after her terrace talk, moved with the same grace that had marked her entrance, her crimson dress still radiant but softer now, reflecting the calm within her. Guests, though thinning out, still glanced her way, some with admiration, others with a respect bordering on awe. The video Lauren had posted in a jealous impulse had spread like wildfire online. Comments piled up. Who is this woman? What a presence. She owned the night. What Lauren meant as mockery had become a tribute to Isabel's strength, each notification proof the world was finally seeing her. Isabel didn't check her phone. She didn't need to. The room's energy, the whispers, the smiles told her story. She was no longer invisible. Daniel, ever the orchestrator, stood at the ballroom's center, his wineglass traded for a microphone. He tapped it lightly, the sharp chime silencing the last conversations. The quartet paused, their strings humming faintly. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice steady, but warm with unexpected emotion. Or rather, "Good morning," as the sun's catching up. He smiled, the gesture warming the room like an invitation to share a secret. Tonight was special, not just for our company's success, but for something bigger, for someone who reminded us what truly matters. His eyes found Isabel's, and she felt a flush, not of embarrassment, but of recognition. He went on, his tone growing solemn. "I saw something tonight that moved me deeply. A woman who, against all odds, chose to rise, to remember who she is, and to show the world no one can dim her light." He paused, letting the words settle, the room holding its breath. "So, I want to announce something. Our company is launching a social initiative, a fund to support women who, like so many, have been overlooked, underestimated, but carry immense strength within. And I want to invite someone to lead this with me, not as a figurehead, but as someone who's lived this truth." He extended his hand toward Isabel, and the room turned to her. "Isabel, will you join me?" he asked, his voice softer, almost personal. She froze, her heart pounding, the crimson dress seeming to pulse with the moment. She thought of Lily, asleep with Michael's teddy bear, of Mrs. Rosa weaving stories with her needle, of herself, the woman who'd nearly faded but stood here now, seen by the world. "Yes," she said, her voice clear, not grandiose but certain. "I accept." The ballroom erupted in applause, a warm, genuine wave. Mrs. Eleanor dabbed a tear, her smile wide with pride. Mark, in the corner, raised his glass in a quiet toast, his glasses glinting. Even guests who'd whispered earlier now clapped, moved by something they couldn't name. Isabel smiled, a simple gesture that lit the room, and walked to Daniel, shaking his hand firmly. "Thank you for seeing what I took so long to see," she whispered. Daniel nodded, his eyes bright with unspoken emotion. Not everyone shared the celebration. Lauren, leaning against a pillar, her sapphire gown dimmer in the morning light, stared at her phone, buzzing with notifications she ignored. Her eyes fixed on Ryan, still on the terrace, his empty bourbon glass on a table. His talk with Isabel had shattered him, not because she'd attacked, but because she'd shown him the truth. He saw what he'd lost, not just a wife, but a woman he'd never valued, a mother who'd raised Lily with a strength he lacked. The realization consumed him. Lauren, sensing the growing distance, climbed the terrace stairs again, her heels sharp like warnings. "Ryan," she called, her voice less sweet, more desperate. "You're not just standing there, are you? The party's winding down and we need to—" She stopped, seeing his face. Ryan wasn't the man she knew, the one who commanded rooms with arrogance. He looked broken, his eyes hollow, his shoulders slumped under the weight of the terrace talk. "I can't keep doing this, Lauren," he said, his voice rough, barely audible against the wind. "I can't pretend everything's fine, that I'm fine. I made wrong choices and now I see it." He met her eyes, and for the first time, Lauren saw vulnerability that scared her. "I need to fix what I broke, not just with Isabel, but with Lily, with the family I walked away from. I don't know if she'll take me back, but I have to try." Lauren opened her mouth to argue, to hold him, to reclaim control, but words failed. Her eyes burned, not with sadness, but with anger, humiliation, a void she couldn't fill. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice trembling, her pearl necklace twisted in her fingers. "After everything, you're throwing this away for her?" But Ryan just shook his head, his gaze on the horizon where the sun rose. "It's not for her, Lauren. It's for me, for who I want to be." She stepped back, her eyes wet but burning, and descended the stairs, her heels echoing like a farewell. Ryan stayed on the terrace, the breeze cold against his face, but for the first time in years, he felt something like hope. Not a promise of redemption, but a start. A step toward a life he wanted to rebuild. In the ballroom, Isabel didn't see Lauren's exit or Ryan's resolve. She was surrounded by people, but her thoughts were on Lily, on a future that felt clearer. Daniel's project wasn't just a job, it was an extension of her, a chance to turn her strength into something bigger, to help other women find their voices. She spoke with Mrs. Eleanor, who hugged her like a daughter, and Mark, who teased that she'd stolen the night without trying. But the moment that struck deepest was when Daniel led her to a table of women, company employees eager to meet her. "They heard about the project," Daniel said, pride in his voice, "and they want to help." The women, varied in age and background, looked at Isabel with admiration and kinship. A young woman with curly hair and bright eyes spoke first. "I saw the video," she said, shy but firm. "You made me believe I can be more too." Isabel's throat tightened, but she smiled, squeezing the woman's hand. "You already are," she said. "You just need to see it." As the party ended and guests drifted away, Isabel left the estate, her dress slightly creased but still vibrant. Daniel walked her to the gate, the sky now orange and pink. "You changed everything tonight," he said, his voice soft but weighty. Isabel laughed, the sound light as the morning breeze. "I just came to be me, Daniel. You made the rest happen." Their eyes met, a connection beyond words. Walking home, the fresh morning air filling her lungs, Isabel thought of Lily, Michael, Mrs. Rosa, all the small moments that led here. She didn't need revenge or validation. She had herself, and that was enough. Ryan somewhere would start his journey to be a better man, maybe a father to Lily, but that wasn't her story anymore. The project with Daniel, the bond with those women, the promise of a future she'd build, that was what mattered. When she opened her door, Lily ran into her arms, clutching Michael's teddy bear. Isabel knew she was exactly where she belonged. The world saw her now, but more importantly, she saw herself. And that was the ending she'd always dreamed of, not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of knowing who she was. If this story touched your heart, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thank you.